Welcome to Secular Soup. Stay tuned for real talk about atheism, feminism, politics, parenting, and whatever the fuck else Amy and Amy want to talk about, because this is their show. And get ready for a whole lot of motherfucking profanity.
You want to hear a secret?
I won't tell anybody. Go ahead. If I sit next to you, I'm going to get gonorrhea. It's going to jump into me. Just two ladies hanging out.
Is it okay for me to make fun of his neck waddle if I make fun of my own neck waddle?
I'm not sure.
That's a real ethical conundrum.
Would you know if you were born a lizard person, or can you be like adopted into the...
I think you know.
We're such professionals.
We really are.
Buckle up, bitches. It's time to have some soup.
I'm Amy with a Y, and I am here solo today without my cohort Amy with an I, because we are putting out a couple of special episodes for the next few weeks of Secular Soup. What we've decided to do is hand over the podcast to some different voices. We know that there are not enough people of color in atheist podcasting specifically, but just in general, and we, as white people, speaking to my fellow white people out there, don't take enough time to listen to what is actually being asked of us or listen to other people's experiences and take those seriously. And since we have a platform, albeit not a very big one, but we have a platform, we have people listening, we wanted to give all of you a chance to hear some voices that you either may not have heard about, or you may not have been able to find, or that you just haven't been seeking out. And you're going to hear it here. So the first conversation we lined up is with Jon Livingston from the Angry Black Rant podcast and David Johnson from the Skeptics and Seekers podcast. And I asked the two of them to just have a conversation with no guidelines whatsoever, no time limits, nothing. Like just what they have the microphone, whatever they want to talk about, we want to hear about. So they gave us a wonderful, almost 2.5 hour conversation that is just amazing. And I hope you all get as much out of it as I did. And this is kind of what we're going to do for the next couple of weeks. So I hope you enjoy this. I hope you get something out of it. Make sure to check the show notes and you'll get links for everything that they are talking about in the podcast. And we just can't thank them enough. So enjoy.
So tell me, who the heck are you? This is our first time meeting.
Right. Well, I'm Jon Livingston. I'm one of the hosts of Angry Black Rant podcast.
Angry Black who?
The Angry Black Rant. Rant. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Words. Angry Black Rant. All right. Do I need to ask what this podcast is about? I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah, there's no subtlety in the name. I don't. Well, I'm David. I don't know if you've heard of me. I am the David Johnson. The one of many David Johnsons. Just pick up a phone book and you'll see like 2 pages of David Johnsons in pretty much every phone book in the country. But I'm the one that hosts Skeptics and Seekers. It is a Christian atheist discussion / debate podcast. And I am the skeptic.
Ah, cool. I actually... once Amy with a Y put this together, I had to scramble and listen to Secular Soup for the first time ever. And I listened to your last episode on Skeptics and Seekers as well. So
did you? Did I have the one on race up at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I'm actually I've got about 5 minutes left in it. But yeah, I like the way you skeptic.
Okay. well, good. I'm not sure if it's all right to use that as a verb, but I'm gonna try it myself since the ice has been broken on it. So let me just real talk here. When I realized, okay, this is Skeptical Soup, I've been so busy this week, and she said, "Look, it's the format is whatever you want it to be." And so I took that as an opportunity to not listen to any episodes of Skeptical Soup. So I actually don't know if what I'm going to do fits in or not, but I'm taking her at her word. What we say goes, because she's gone and we have the mic. So let's do things with the mic that might make her whinge. I don't know what will make her whinge exactly, but it's my effort to try. So that said, John, you're clearly a black person who needs to rant. Do I have that much right about you?
Pretty much, yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay. So
these are times for ranting.
What? I'm just going to also make an assumption that you have heard of George Floyd, right?
I'm not. The name sounds familiar. I think I may have heard it on TV a couple of times, or maybe on some live somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah. So here's a name I want to throw out. You may have heard of this name too. The name is it just slipped my mind now. Help me out. It's the guy, the news anchor from CNN, that was arrested.
Oh.
His name is like Ameiys. Ameiys is the last name. So this is a name that you should know as well. Let's see if I can pull that up right quick.
I had to think about a CNN anchor arrested. I've heard of the protests that went on last night and the day before in Atlanta due to the murder of Rashard Brooks.
Okay, yeah, it's Omar Ameiys, by the way. That's the name I was trying to pull up. Sorry, Omar Ameiys. This is kind of where I jumped into the issue full foot, because I had heard of George Floyd, but I didn't really know the story so much. And I had turned on my television one morning, obviously not that long after it, and I was watching the CNN broadcast live. So this is as it was happening. And the news anchor was Omar Ameiys, and he's a black anchor on the Man on the Streets for CNN. Mm-hmm. And they were covering, I want to say it was the morning after the first night of protests with George Floyd. And he had his news team with him, and he was talking about what had happened that night, and how things kind of blew up out of control, but things were now under control. The streets were peaceful, but this large contingent of police officers had moved in to the area, and back in Atlanta, they were asking Ameiys to just go over quickly what this whole thing was all about, and he was about to recap the whole George Floyd incident and what led him there. And just as he did, the police came up to him, and he said, "Okay, wait a minute, I gotta deal with this situation." And he's talking to the police, and this is all unfolding live. And we couldn't hear the police side of the conversation very well, but we kept hearing Ameiys say, "Well, okay, we'll this is where we're told to be, but we'll be glad to be somewhere else. Wherever you want us to be, it's fine." He made sure that they knew that he was with CNN. He has a badge. And the conversation kept on that way for a couple of minutes. And then a couple of officers just grabbed him, put his hands behind his back, cuffed him. The last thing you hear him say is, "Why am I being arrested?" and I dragged that fellow off like a gangster and his crew. And that to me was actually the touchstone of my rage with this. It wasn't the George Floyd incident at all. It was adjacent to the George Floyd incident. So I just wanted to give some context on this. I mean, when I had heard about George Floyd, I knew scant details and I was watching the news for it. But that incident right there enraged me, and it shook me in a way that few things have. And once again, it may not have shaken me that way if I had seen it as a recording, a later report. But it was just happening right there. I called my mother in Alabama. I was so shaken by it. I had to yell at somebody. What are moms for? So, I mean, if she didn't want me to call and randomly yell at her over outrages, she should have died by now. So she's still alive. She gets to be yelled at from time to time for no good reason. Love you, Mom. So tell me where you got in on the rage in this particular incident. How did what cereal were you eating at the time?
Well, with George Floyd, I was actually just getting off of work, doing this lovely Corona work from home with my kids and all. And I actually just glanced at the video because I had to deal with my kids, and I knew what the story was going to be as soon as I saw a black man's name that wasn't already a celebrity in police. I knew what was going to happen. I knew, yeah, he got shot. He was unarmed. Now, later on, I can figure out what the details and all were. But you see a random black man's name and police, and unfortunately, it's the same thing, different day. He got shot for being black, essentially. So I clamped down on it there so I could get my kids together. Then later on that night, watching more of the video and some of the protests, it just started bubbling up more in me. You say it kind of sparked the rage for you, but in my case, that I've been angry at the police for somewhere around 30 years now, ever since Susan Smith. You mentioned your mom is in Alabama. I'm in South Carolina. And my first instance with this type of police brutality and police racism was when I was 15 and all of 90 pounds, and cops were harassing me because I fit the description of the 30 to 40-year-old man that allegedly kidnapped Susan Smith and her kids. Ever since then, I've had a kind of a sour spot for police. So I'm. It's not like it. It's been simmering forever, because I'm 40 now. So I mean, literally for most of my life, it's been simmering.
Yeah. So I just turned 50 this year, and I have not been simmering for most of my life. I'll tell you where I was for most of my life later. But I left out an important part of this drama, and I think it is probably important to just mention another name, Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah.
You remember Ahmaud Arbery. So he was the name that everyone was talking about before George Floyd. A friend of mine, a white friend of mine, had been talking to me about Arbery, and we were having some conversation about that. We have this conversation every time one of these things comes up. And I hadn't been following the Arbery case that much. And so, by the time I really got interested in looking up the details, that's when the Floyd thing hit. And so I didn't even have time to get mad at the Arbery situation. It's just another fool then got killed by some white folk. He did not get a full 15 minutes of fame because these things just happen in rapid succession. Bam, bam, bam. And it's so exhausting. It's just it's really exhausting. And the list doesn't actually end with George Floyd either. So the fact is, it's so easy to get angry and jaded. I spent most of my life, I'd say most of my life, not angry and jaded. And that's because I spent most of my life as a Black conservative. And so I would have been on the other side of the issue. The way I used to hear these things, if we go back to Rodney King, the way I used to hear these things is, I would see the story and I would say, well, whatever the police did, I'm sure the guy deserved it. I don't have any pity for him at all. That's just one more criminal off the streets by any means. And you might think, well, how could you as a Black man think that way? But I did think that way. And I know for a fact that's how a lot of well-meaning white people think, even if they won't say it out loud to you. They used to say it out loud to me. Because I was one of them. They forgot. But I've always been a person who
you were one of the good Negroes.
Yes, that's right. I would have been the descendant of a house slave, not a field slave. And so I definitely enjoyed many of the benefits of being a properly well-heeled, well-trained, tame Black man. And when you were that, you don't see what's happening to the others out in the field, even though it's most of them. And you tend to think it's their own fault for one way or the other. I mean, these white people aren't so bad. Look, I eat 3 square meals a day and I wear this nice suit and I take care of their dog. It's it's a very different existence that you have. And everything that you know about race, you learn from white people. So you'd be surprised. It's very easy to think that way. The analogy that I used the other day, speaking privately to someone, but I'll use it here. The analogy, if you are religiously inclined, might be Moses. What was Moses? Well, Moses was a Hebrew. He was a Jew. He was a dirty, slimy Jew. But did he know that? Well, he was raised by the princess. He was raised to be the heir apparent. He was raised in the mansion. He was educated, had the good ring on his finger and the good robe on. He commanded people. The Hebrews that he commanded were his own people. But did he see their slavery as a problem? No, not really. Because everything he knew about the heroes, he learned from the Egyptians. Right. And so it took a little bit before he realized, hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute. And that's kind of how it was with me. And that's how it is with a lot of people, I would say. So that would be the analogy I would use there. But it sounds like you have always been on the rougher side of the line.
Oh yeah. You mentioned you would have been a descendant of house Negroes. I've been able to trace my lineage back to just a little bit before slavery ended, and well, legal non-prison slavery ended at least.
I appreciate you qualifying that. Maybe we can get to talk about that in a little bit. But yes, go ahead.
And yeah, field Negroes all the way now.
I think we could probably say field niggers. Can we say that? Because honestly, you and I are talking around a fairly common parlance. So when you study this in history, or you talk to the old ones who used to understand and use this terminology, what we're talking about is field niggers versus house niggers. And so I'm not entirely sure why we need to dance around that.
No worries. I was just with your previous conservative sensibilities and with the this going out to Sex Soup as well. Just wanted to.
You know what? I am not worried about those fools. Man, their email address is like delightful bitches or something like that. I think we can say house niggers.
All right. Just so we're on the same page.
All right, that's fine. But yeah. Now, my friends, they all cringe now because they're used to the tame version of me. You know, the good black man.
So, yeah, that's it. The good Negro.
Yeah.
But what I was going at is with my background and the background of a lot of people in my community here in South Carolina, and those descendants of the field niggas, we grew up on the other side than you, like you said, and we had to be not only bilingual in that we could talk to each other differently than we would talk to someone at work or blah blah blah, but we actually have kind of a split personality when it comes to it, because we have to be able to walk and function in the Black society as well as the mainstream white American society here.
Right.
As those of a more pink hue, and I tend to call them pink instead of white, and that's brown or melanated instead of black, because of the connotations with those words. White is always good, black is always bad. So I try and get away from those. So just so you have an idea. But I
don't know. There are a few negative connotations for whiteheads. You pop those. Let's see. You're pale as a ghost. You have no. That's not healthy. White spots on fruit. That's not good. Don't eat that. So I mean, there are one or two.
Yeah, exactly, one or two, as opposed to how many for good.
Right. No, I'm not actually arguing against you.
that and the fact that calling them pink really pisses them off.
Yeah. Or let's see, as the Andorian-owned Enterprise used to call Captain Archer, pink skins. Right.
But when you grow up in a black culturally and black society, on the other end of the spectrum than you were, you have to learn how to live in that other society as well.
Yes.
When you grow up in pink society, because it's the mainstream, because it's the default, you don't have to be able to move into another society. You don't have to be able to see the viewpoint of anyone else, because yours is the default. Everyone has to conform to you.
Right, and let me just add to that, because I know that there's some listening from SNS and other places that may not understand this thing that we're talking about. I don't want to simplify it to say there are two kinds of black people, but there are two kinds of black people at minimum, and it's a very deeply entrenched gulf between the two. We do not historically get along. And so if you're thinking about black culture as a monolithic thing, you are wrong. You are so wrong. And the fact is, growing up, so I won't say too much about my growing up, but I will say that I have lived in some black neighborhoods. And I've lived in white neighborhoods, but I've grown up around white people more than black people. I've had, my church experiences were white church experiences just as much as they were black church experiences. White education experiences. All of my wives were white. Yes, I said all of my wives.
Did you have them all at the same time? That's the question.
If only. Honestly, if I did, I think I'd still be married to all of them. But that's not how it works in this country. I'm a bad candidate for marriage, people. So if I find myself divorced again, don't marry me. But the people who marry me are white women. I've never had a black wife. I've never had a black girlfriend. And that's fairly interesting all by itself, a thing that I'm not going to deeply explore. But what I will say is that when I began my ministry, I did a ministry for a little while when I was still a Christian. I grew up in the church.
I've been there.
Yeah. Well, of course, you're black. We all have. There are no native black atheists, okay? We might become atheists.
I've actually met quite a few since I've come out.
I don't believe it. They are lying. We have all been through the church. We've been sifted through the church. Maybe in the North you've met a few. They don't exist in the South, man. Come on.
In Atlanta, they're usually the sons and daughters of ex-Panthers and the like. But yeah, I've met quite a few.
Well, when I was there, I did a racial reconciliation ministry. So I don't know if you've ever seen or taken part of any of those, but I had to learn something about Black history because I thought I knew about Black history, but I only knew about one side of Black history. And so it was a little awkward at first, but I did learn. I took a deep dive, took years to do this, and I realized that people used to say that I was racist against Black people, and I thought they were fools. But actually, I discovered they were right. As a matter of fact, that is probably true. I was probably bigoted against a certain type of Black person because I had drank deeply from the Black conservative ideas, the very white conservative ideas, really. So I had to learn how to deal with, work with, talk to, and live around the type of Black person that wasn't my kind of Black person. Which seemed like most of us actually, and it was a different thing to me. I approached getting to know Blackness kind of like a white person would because I didn't really know it at all, and it was scary. It was scary surrounding myself by the field niggers. And learning their language and culture. And it took me a long time to just recognize and be able to admit, you know what, you do have a culture that is legitimate, that's valid. And learning how to walk between the two types of Black people. Walking among white people was easy. Walking among Black people was hard. But I did learn it. And
think about how frightening and possibly difficult that was for you as someone who we would intrinsically welcome just by color of your skin, more so than, say, the Karen, and just to throw that word out there, the Karen who is immediately, when trying to blend in or trying to learn about the culture, is immediately seen with suspicion. And if things ever went down and there's a Karen who went through the same experience that you did, figure out how to walk between the two cultures, and you side by side, and things went down, the Karen can still rely on her whiteness to have at least a little bit more of a pass than you.
Well, right, but they actually may get a little bit of a pass for being unfamiliar with culture, and maybe they say things wrong. But if they're trying, they might get a pass. Me, I didn't really get a pass because I honestly, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was afraid of the people I was around. And I mean, at first I literally talked like this. How are you doing, homie? What is up, brother? Can I say it was inauthentic? It was. Every time I used anything that seemed like jargon, I would have to stop and think, did I use that right? I don't know. I want to go home. Where are the suburbs? These aren't the suburbs. White people save me. So yeah, it's we have historically not been one people, and honestly, there hasn't been much that has been able to unite us as a people, and I don't know that we're united even now. There's always going to be a difference, it seems, between someone like a Barack Obama and a Jesse Jackson. They don't seem to breathe the same air.
They are much closer than you would expect. I'm not sure what your growing up Black conservative take of Jesse Jackson is or was, but yeah, he's firmly in. We traded him a long time ago.
Oh, did we? Okay. Yes. See, I don't keep up with the Black news. I don't know what we did.
He's only relevant to bring out for conservatives mostly, and a good deal of respectable Democrats. Well, this is my friend. He's our token. He's the one. This is how it should be done. We didn't like him back when he was running with Martin Luther King. Also, somebody that me personally I don't particularly like.
We have to talk about that because I said some very incendiary things on my last podcast about Martin Luther King. I haven't received the death threats yet, but I feel like they're going to be coming soon.
No, not from my side of the table. I liked him a lot back in my Christian days. Mm-hmm. Back when I was studying to become a minister, to the point where I went to his alma mater, Morehouse, and with the goal of majoring in religion, going that whole Reverend Doctor route. Mm-hmm. I liked him. But then I went to Morehouse and met some of his classmates, mm-hmm. people who actually knew him and went to History 101 with him, like classmates. I was able to work with the Journal of Negro History, which was situated at Morehouse at the time, and see some of his papers from back then, see some of his classwork, and get to know him a good deal better. Chill with his kids. And yeah, he quickly became one of my least favorite people, both in and out of the civil rights movement, just in his personal life.
Right, but it's often true that great men are not good men.
Well, that's. I mean, even his iconic place in the civil rights movement is pretty much bullshit. He was the figurehead of it for the most part, and I'm not a fan of his nonviolent stance, and never really have been of his nonviolent stance.
Let's talk about violence. So first of all, let me just courageously say I am well. This is not the courageous part. I don't like violence, and I wish that all revolutions could be done without it, but I don't know of any that have ever been done without it. And so when I hear white people speak favorably of nonviolent protests, and when a person protests and then the white people say that was a good protest, I immediately think, well, that was not a good protest because the other side liked it. You should. So there's already something wrong with it. You are already playing into their hand. You are protesting in the approved manner, and a protest is not something the other side ought to approve. A protest ought to be scary.
There's a quote, I can't remember who it's from, but I heard it about 3 years ago. It might have been Sean King, friend of mine from Morehouse. We were dorm mates my freshman year. Mm-hmm. But he said something along the lines of, if you have to get a permit for it, it's a parade, not a protest.
Right. Yes. That's it exactly. That's what I'm trying to state. So I'm just going to steal that. If you've got to get a permit for it, it's a parade, not a protest. And when the people in power give you permission to protest, you're not protesting.
Right.
And so that's the thing about peaceful protests that bother me. Even though I still say I don't like the idea of violence, but I'm not entirely sure what you feel like you can accomplish with peaceful protest, because the people in power are not scared enough of you. They're not moved enough by you, not shaken enough by you to actually do anything.
Correct. Which is one of the reasons why this whole coronavirus lockdown, this corona team that we've kind of been off and on again for the last couple months, when the mostly conservatives again, mostly pink, have been protesting against it. Let us go back out. Let us go back out. They've done so with guns on their backs, visible. And nothing's happened to them. Because there is the violence or threat of violence. Okay, we can't, the pigs, those in power, the police, can't just do anything to them because, hey, we can see that these people are armed, that they are willing to fight for what they believe in. And we start getting things opened up. When they protest when they, and those really most of the times are protests, no permits or anything like that, for whatever, they have their weapons on them, proudly showing them. Another legacy of slavery in this country is that Black folk are afraid of guns. We don't own them. We don't play with them. We don't do cops and robbers. We don't do Nerf guns. We barely do water guns. We're afraid of guns. But that's how things get done in this country.
So can you imagine any of the protests in New York, the protests in Minneapolis, if 1,000 Black people marched on the town square with rifles and permits? They're allowed to carry them, but if that had been the scene, we would have rolled tanks into those cities.
We did roll tanks.
We did, and what we were armed with we were armed with bottles.
I went to one of the protests, or I drove through one of the protests downtown in my city, and I was pushed off the road by one of the SWAT team's tanks, and everybody there, again, water bottles and cell phones. There may have been a couple concealed carries like mine, but again, concealed, so yeah. Out of sight, out of mind type deal.
Well, you better conceal it.
Well, that's the law here in South Carolina.
Sure.
It's not an open carry state. If it were an open carry state, yes, I would have had mine out.
But you're lucky not to have yours out. I mean, there were stories leading up to this not that long ago. I'm sorry, I'm not armed with a list of names and so forth, just memories of the stories. I remember at least one situation where the police had stopped a Black man, and he actually did have a gun, but he was not using his gun or threatening with his gun. He was reaching to show to get his license to show that he had license to carry. They shot that fool dead because Black people aren't supposed to have guns. I don't care what the law is. If all the people that we've been talking about had guns on them, the white people in the country would have been saying, "Oh yeah, good riddance." You know that carrying guns is legal, right?
they're saying that anyway, though. That's the thing. We've had conversations about it for centuries at this point, about race relations and how to make things better for centuries. We've had marches and protests, both the valid and invalid kinds, and resolutions passed for centuries. Same shit. We've tried holding hands and singing Kumbaya like King wanted. We've tried kneeling like Cap wanted. We tried sitting down. We tried talking. We tried podcasts.
We tried forgiveness.
We tried to expose it on the news like Jimenez. We've tried to do it from the inside, like John Lewis becoming congressman or senator or whatever the hell he is. Not a particular fan of his either. We've even gotten to the point where we've had a Black president. Nothing has changed because we're still
If I could, well, I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying that I actually will come back to this. I kind of think that having a Black president has worked against us. I don't think that actually helped us. I think it hurt. But
definitely that Democrat Republican 2-year pendulum in the White House, the blowback that we're getting in the form of Trump. Yeah.
Yeah. It hurt us in that way, but it also hurt us in another way. It hurt us rhetorically, because now the white person can say, "Oh, there's no systemic racism. You see, you've had a Black president."
They've been saying that. They said, "Oh, there's no such thing as racism. Look at Oprah. oh, there's no such thing as racism. Look at W.B. Du Bois. Before him, oh, there's no such thing as racism. Look at not Nat Turner, but Frederick Douglass. It's the same thing. We're not going to change the excuses they use or them trying to reason their way out of what's going on by using the same tactics. It's insanity, literally insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results.
So they used to say that about me too. There's no such thing as racism. What are you talking about? Look at you. You're doing okay.
Right.
That just makes me want to punch them in the face. And I know that sounds like I've got this pent up violence in me. Trust me, I'm not going to punch anyone in the face. I've got a pinched nerve. I suffer from it greatly. I'm not swinging this arm for nothing. So.
I am in no way, shape, or form an advocate for nonviolence. Punch him. Punch a Nazi. Punch a racist. Yes. Yeah.
If I'm with you. If I were young, I probably would. And the thing is, like, I had asked about violence earlier. So here's my violent past. I'm legally blind and black. I've got a double whammy on me. And so I have had to punch my way out of sticky situations lots of times as a kid. There's no help for it. You either become a victim or you become good with your hands. And honestly, even if you're not good with your hands,
scale that up to society at large, and
exactly. No, exactly. I'm all the way with you because once again, you're either going to become a victim or you're going to have to become good with your hands. You're going to, at some point, violence comes to you. You don't have to go to violence. You don't have to seek it out. You don't have to have a wish to hit somebody. At a certain level of minority status in this country, it will come to you, and you will either have to stand and deliver, or you will be a victim. And I would say that even if you're not good at fighting, it's better to fight and get your ass kicked, because that person who bullied you is less likely to do it again. Because they don't want to fight. Bullies actually don't want to fight. And this is true at the societal level too. So I'm speaking almost metaphorically here.
Or even if that same bully, because I've been in that situation as well. I got bullied pretty much up into high school. But I was in one fight in high school. It was my last fight in high school. The guy who was bullying me, he just caught me at a bad day. Confluence of happy just you all. I fought back. Gave as good as I got. Everybody was doing the whole, "Ooh, you got beat up," to both of us. But after that one, he still bugged me a bit, but nobody else did. Mm-hmm. So even if that bully that you're actually physically fighting against does come back at you, other people won't, because they don't want to get they don't want to get in fights. I'm not one of those people who think that bullies don't like to fight. Bullies like to fight. Fighting is a fun thing. That's why MMA and pro wrestling and literally all of our violent sports like lacrosse and football, hockey, that's why they're there. They're outlets for violence for people who are intrinsically violent. Bullies do like to fight. They don't like to lose.
I think that's true of some bullies. I mean, a lot of bullies run in packs, and so they actually don't. They like to beat people up. They don't want to fight, and so you get 3 or 4 people on one person. That's someone who doesn't actually like to fight. And you notice these incidents of police violence. They almost from Rodney King to George Floyd. They happen in packs. It's so you seldom hear about one police officer using police brutality. It's usually like 4 or 6 or 8, and that's when they can show their real machismo. It's awkward talking about violence, but I think that white people need to hear black people speaking honestly about violence. So this is kind of a good thing. White people like violence too, right? Because most of us, well, let's just be honest. Most of us believe in just war. This is America. We're not pacifists here. And when the cause is right, when we're on the side of the angels, we got a lot of big guns that people in the rest of the world don't have. We are very strong believers in violence to make change when we think the cause is right. And so I do think there's something to be said for black people standing up and saying, when is this cause righteous enough?
Well, that there are 2 things in that I want to discuss. Mm-hmm. So I am of the opinion, based on being a history major, being my religion, my personal history. I'm of the opinion that worldwide, American is synonymous with white. Mm-hmm. One, when you say Americans love a good cause, being on fighting for the side of the angels. Yeah, that's always been the more WASP-ish side of America. White Anglo-Saxon Protestant and capitalist male. Those angels are on their side. Mm-hmm. And the wars, those just wars, are always they always tend to coincide with the economic, or mostly the economic, but or political goals of whoever's in charge at the time. Mm-hmm. Because remember, the Confederates thought that they were on the side of the angels, that they were literally doing what their Bible told them to do, and that they owned slaves, and that their Bible told them that the white was superior and everyone else was going to hell.
Right.
That it's all a matter of perspective.
Right, but no matter what your perspective, it's not. I'm not making a statement that our wars are always just, but when we think they're just, we're really okay with violence. That's all I'm saying. And so, at what point is the black cause just enough for violence? You ask the white person that, it's never going to be just enough for violence. And this is the thing that I've been coming around to just over the last few days, really, is I have to let go of this idea that I'm against violence at all costs here, because I'm not against violence. I actually believe in just war myself. Hell, I believe in the death penalty. So there are times when there's nothing else you can do but kill a person, and that's a strong statement, but I stand by that. So I do believe in violence. This is the thing. I believe in violence. It's just that it's not politically correct to say I believe in violence when it comes to defending the rights of black people. and I'm gonna stop that. I do believe in violence when an injustice is being done and negotiation does not work. War is diplomacy by other means. Well, when do we get our diplomacy?
So yeah, I'm with you there, and I know it's pie in the sky. I've been told this many times by many people in my social circles, but it's pie in the sky. But I don't think that we are ever going to get justice in this country or the equality in the United States as it is now. My position, my official position, not the one of Angry Black Rant, but Jon, is burn it all down and start over. Scrap the Constitution, take out the parts that are interesting, and redo it. The American experiment has failed because it started out on a rotten foundation. We can't just repaint the house. We've got to tear it down and start it over again.
So let's go there because this is an entree for me to talk about history, one of my favorite subjects, and nobody cares about history. As a person who's done this for a long time, nobody gives a damn about history. So I'm stuck being a buff with something that nobody cares about. But you're not gonna have that problem with me. Trust me. Okay. So this is what you just said there. I think may be the heart of the conversation, and I think it's the hardest thing that white people can hear. And in fact, I think most of them, even the ones on your side, stopped listening when you said burn it all down. And I have to just join you again and say, yeah, I'm a burn it all down kind of guy too. And I think it's a matter of perspective. A lot of people in America think that the American experiment has worked beautifully. And I would say that it's half worked. It worked beautifully for some people, kind of like the 1950s was great America for some people. So
we have to go back to that whole definition of American as white.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male, America's fucking great. Fucking hey, dude.
It's awesome. And so they don't. These people that are cringing when we say burn it all down don't understand Colin Kaepernick's kneeling. They think that he's disrespecting their great grandfather who wore the uniform. Colin Kaepernick does not give a damn about your great grandfather. Your great grandfather probably owned his great grandfather as a slave, man. You are really missing the point when you don't see that. So let's go backward a little bit. I want to regress the conversation and bring it all the way back to burn it down, so that at least I can try to leave a trail of crumbs for people to follow if they do want to dig into the history. Everybody knows about slavery, right? Everybody knows that happened.
That it happened.
Right. They think of it as the past, but they do at least know about it, right? Okay, so I think that's fair to start there, and we can say at that point we can take a snapshot and say that's institutional racism. Everybody will agree. Now,
I think we need to back it up just a little bit more.
Okay.
So, the original Constitution, before the amendments, nothing about slavery at all.
No. Because
they wanted to push it down the road a little bit. Then they put the 3/4 slaves are 3/4 of a person. So black people are not real people in the eyes of the Constitution. Again, from day one.
Right.
Not real people. That is institutional. If your foundational document doesn't recognize you as a real person, you can't get more institutional than that. When they tried to fix slavery through the amendments and abolish, a little bit further back with the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln, the great emancipator, he emancipated. His proclamation was for people or slaves in the states that were currently under rebellion in the Confederacy. Or he issued an order that affected people that he had no control over. I mean, okay, you need to turn off the lights in your house over there, wherever you are right now, David. I'm ordering you to do that. And you're like, yeah, what the fuck ever. When it became a amendment where slavery is abolished, except in the instance of criminal activity. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it up in front of me right now. But slavery is abolished except as punishment for crime. That's the institutional racism that starts with the police. Right there. It's all the Constitution. Scrap that, start over.
So, let's make another observation about the Constitution. While we've got this dusty document open, when it said all men are created equal, black men were not considered men.
Women were not considered men.
Well, right. Well,
right. I mean,
women were no. So I'm just saying, when they said it, they actually meant it literally.
Right.
They meant white. What they really meant was free white men are created equally.
Sure.
Because a black man did not have was not seen as a full man under the law. That it was understood that we weren't talking about them. They were never written into that great ideal. We had to break our way into that great ideal.
And even with the white men that were a part of that ideal, it was only landowning white
men, right?
So the one from back then.
the idea, though, I think all white men had at least the opportunity to own land. They could, there were not artificial barriers in their way. And so even if you were not a land-owning man at that time, you could be. There was nothing in your caste that would keep you from doing that. And there was nothing in the laws that would, keep a white man from doing it. There were many things in the law that tried to keep black men from owning land even when they could. So, so in order to be counted as one of the all men, we had to break into that. We had to burst into that, tear and claw our way into that. That was not meant for us. And so that is important to observe. And I appreciate you bringing that out. And so, we can look at these early examples of institutional racism. And I challenge the white listener to give me the time in history when they think the institutional racism stopped. That's simply a challenge that I think a lot of them never think about. I think what some are thinking about is, well, slavery ended, right? We got the emancipation. That did not end institutional racism. As you mentioned, the very idea of the police force, and we go back to the slave patrols, the paddy rollers, as they would have been called back then. Their whole job was to deal with the black problem. Now, originally it was the escaped slave problem, but think about it for a moment. You're a white man in the South, and you're kind of deputized to round these people up because they're a threat. You don't know the difference between an escaped slave and a free black man. It was a black person problem that they had to deal with. And after slavery was over, that institution of dealing with the black problem continued with policing. So we had almost 100 years of Jim Crow.
Well, it's a little bit even deeper than that, because we're talking about the landed and unlanded white men back in the slave patrol days. The ones who were picked to be the slave patrol were almost always the lower class, unlanded white men who couldn't get a job doing anything else for whatever reason. So they used white lower classes against black lower classes because the white lower classes could always say, hey, no matter how bad I am or my family is doing right now, we're not them. We have somebody that we can look down on. And as long as we keep them down through these slave patrols, through catching runaway slaves who were never enslaved, just random black people because they could, and essentially killing them because they could, as long as we keep them down, our position is safe. We're not going to be at the bottom. We may not be at the top, but damn it, we're not them dirty niggers.
Right. And that's, by the way, that's the history of the police. That's who they were, and that was their job. And society was very happy with them because those people were committed to dealing with the black threat. There's always been a black threat throughout history for white people to be afraid of and use harsh measures to deal with. And it doesn't matter whether the threat was real or imagined. That threat was always there for them. And so during that 100 years of Jim Crow, it got bad. It was really more like 90 years, but it got bad. It got ugly in ways that are hard to recount. Read a book, people. During that time, there was something called sundown towns. Are you familiar with sundown towns?
Oh yeah, there are sundown sections. There were sundown sections of the city where I grew up here in South Carolina. So yeah,
yeah, right.
Those places that if your skin was dark, you did not get caught there after the sun went down.
Right. No. So I'm thinking though that possibly 98% of the listeners do not know what we're talking about. Because let me tell you something, sundown towns are not taught in school. So right. I don't know where they would have read about it. But yes, that is exactly right. Basically, it's places where a nigger better not be caught by sundown. That's literally how they got their name, and they were called that, sundown towns. And in these places, if you were there at a certain hour, it was open season on you. Literally open. You can just be rounded up, raped, lynched, ripped from limb to limb, whatever. It didn't matter. Many citizens could be involved. No one was ever arrested for lynching a black person during this time. This is an exaggeration. Maybe someone was, but
convicted. They were arrested a couple of times, but they were never convicted. Right.
So there's a history of this, and I want to connect a little bit more history. Because it's not just the police that we're talking about. It's also the vigilante organizations that worked alongside the police. Because there was never enough, quote unquote, official police to get the job done. And there were always concerned citizens who formed militia groups to kind of...
They formed clans.
Yes. Yeah, we might call them clans. And they colored outside of the lines where the official police could not. And this is why I kind of say they worked alongside and hand in hand. They were doing God's work.
A lot of times they're the same people.
Yes, a lot of times. And so it's important to recognize this relationship between the militia and the police and the things that were done that the various militias / clans / respectable organizations did at that time. To this day, we have black people being harried by concerned night watch militia-minded people, kind of like Arbery just before Floyd. like Trayvon Martin. I think that he was one of those. And it's hard, even to this day, to convict those militias. To this day, it's hard to get a conviction. You think it's hard to convict police? It's hard to convict the militias. Those side groups that operate that way. That is a part of our history. That didn't just start today. That has been the case for as long as there has been the black threat all the way back to slavery and post-slavery. So we can't say that it ended then. What about Martin Luther King? Did Martin Luther King solve the problem for us, John?
Yeah, he solved the problem for a lot of the pink-skins.
He did. I know it sounds really strange for people. I'm listening to this with the ears of my white friends, because you've got to remember, I'm mostly white. Yes, I'm dark skinned. I'm probably darker than you, but trust me, I'm mostly white. I'm listening to this.
White on the inside.
Yeah, I'm white on the inside, man.
I don't want to say Oreo, but
I am. I would have had beautiful children if I had had any. So Martin Luther King, he didn't really fix the problem. And yet a lot of white people to this day say, okay, well, the Jim Crow laws were mostly taken off the books. They actually mistakenly think that all of the Jim Crow laws were taken off the books at that time. And that is not true. Up until like 10 or 15 years ago, we still had laws on the books in some places against mixed race marriages. Now, they weren't enforced, but they were still on the books. A lot of those Jim Crow laws just never came off the books at all. One
good thing from Jesse Jackson said a quote similar to, "It's no longer Jim Crow, it's James R. Crow Esquire." I mean, it's same guy. It's just a tad bit more sophisticated now.
I'm sorry. That's terrible. All right. That's fantastic. Thank you, Jesse Jackson. It's made all the funnier when you hear him say it with a lisp. So let's just kind of whistle past Martin Luther King for the moment. If anyone on SNS wants to talk to me more about what I don't like about Martin Luther King and why I think he was actually not, I won't say he was bad for black people, but he certainly wasn't good for us. And he was certainly good for pacifying white racists of his day. Yeah. So let's whistle past him for the moment and look at some of the reforms in the 60s, in the 70s for a moment. We'll get to drugs in just a minute, but one of the things I glossed over the last time I talked about this was welfare, in our kind of a safety net. And I wanted to talk about
yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. You know welfare, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That came out exceedingly wrong, but I get what you're saying.
I'm not asking you how much your check is, all right? That's not what I'm asking. But I think it bears mention because the finances of poor blacks, poor everybody really, but I think we're really targeting poor blacks here, is an important part of the picture. I won't spend that much time on it, but I have been on welfare in my lifetime. Not for a terribly long time, but long enough to understand it, as the British would say. I've been on the dole. And in our country, so if there are people listening outside of the country, just heads up, this may sound funny to your ear. In our country, we actually have, first of all, our welfare systems give you just enough income to die a little slower. There's nothing there that will help you actually live and prosper and better yourself. It's a very thin safety net, if we call it a safety net. But there are incentives within our welfare system that really should be called disincentives. So if you are on welfare, getting a job might be the wrong thing to do. In fact, in almost all cases, it is the wrong thing to do if what you're trying to do is maximize your income, because you will lose your welfare. So you might get a job at McDonald's for minimum wage, but now that's all you've got. And that's probably worse than the welfare that you were getting. So you are disincentivized to work and get a job and build that way. You're disincentivized to save. Any savings you have would be counted against you. So again, it doesn't pay.
And at the same time, you are incentivized to have more kids and not get married.
So I was just about to get there. Go ahead and preach it, brother. Because this is another part of it where I think our friends from across the pond simply would not understand this. Go ahead.
You get more money depending on how many kids that you have and how many people are in the household. But as soon as you get married, those thresholds for how much you get and how it's dispersed and all drops. So one of the reasons why a lot of people that I personally know who are on welfare live with their significant others for decades, never get married, because it's financially would ruin them. I know other people who have multiple kids. One, they're not using protection, but they don't want to use protection because they know that, okay, my oldest is aging out of the system now, so I can't use their money for them for welfare. So I need to have another one now. I mean, it's the system itself is designed to keep people who are on it where they are.
Right.
There's no upward mobility.
Right.
Regardless of what the rhetoric says. We want the dignity of work, but you really don't.
It is one of the best ways to keep poor blacks poor, to keep black families separated, and to make sure that cycle is perpetuated. This quote unquote safety net is killing our people.
Now, do you know the origins of this safety net? No.
Some of it, but it sounds like you might know more. So I'm gonna give it to you.
So and it all starts again with armed black men, the Black Panthers. Just like how the NRA decided to be against assault weapons when Black Panthers stormed the California state capitol legally. They started doing weapons bans and things like that. One of the other things that the Panthers did in their communities was food programs. They'd give shell out breakfast for free to students or to kids or whoever else every morning in their communities because they knew their parents' jobs weren't enough to do it. People were going hungry. They would work with local shops to give out free shoes and pants, like Goodwill type stuff. And that's one of the ways that they recruited. One of the ways that they started to rise in black neighborhoods were these helping hands programs. Mm-hmm. The government under Hoover, FBI under Hoover, was doing everything that they could to disband the Black Panthers through COINTELPRO, trying to put Panthers against each other. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. But one of the things that worked very well for them was to criminalize a lot of the breakfast programs and those goodwill programs. And then almost immediately after criminalizing it, they would institute it as a new measure in the government, as a welfare program. So see, you don't have to go to the Black Panthers to get your food stamps and all that. You can come to us. And all the negative smear campaign that the FBI had against Black Panthers, coupled with them doing exactly what the Panthers were doing, only legitimately through the government, it shut it down. And those types of programs started to trickle up to the rest of the country out of California and became welfare.
So I knew a part of this story, but not all of it. I appreciate that. That's very important. And let me just say that welfare, no matter how it got started, was a good idea. Countries that don't have safety nets, real safety nets for their citizens, I don't know what they're thinking. And America's never had a great one. But I must say that with the good that the Panthers intended, what ultimately came out of and what ultimately we have now is the opposite of good for people who need a safety net.
Because they took it out of the hands of the community that it was serving, and essentially gave it to the government, to the masters. It's when very, very seldom when the government gets a hold of something does it make it better.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah. Okay. People go to the library, read a book. So after let's progress it to Reagan, maybe a little after, we get something called the war on drugs. How did we get such a drug problem, John?
Reagan. Reagan was the governor of California when the Panthers did their due. Mm-hmm. And again, drugs was a good way of trying to delegitimize them. When he got to the White House, a lot of those same policies that he had towards the Panthers got spread nationally. But Reagan was, from what I've read, was pretty much a puppet. His advisors were staunch racist and wanted to keep Black people down because that's how they made their money, either in the military industrial complex, because Black and brown folks make up the vast majority of the armed forces, because we have very few other options, or had very few other options at the time.
Yeah, armed forces looks like a pretty good deal for us.
Right. Or they had something to do with the prison system, which is where a good deal of us are as well. Or pharmaceuticals industry back then, where a lot of things were tested on us. Tuskegee experiment, the Gila genes from Henrietta Lacks. I mean, this country has always been and continues to be built on the backs of poorly paid, unhealthy, poorly educated Black and brown people. That's never changed.
So let's take a little bit more of a look at the drug problem and the war on drugs. So the problem with drugs, I'm just going to summarize this the way a white person might think about drugs. The problem with drugs is they mess up your mind and they make you do things, and they're against God's will above all else. And it's a black problem. Black people are doing illegal drugs far and away more than white people. It's almost all black people. And they create violence on the streets and violence among each other. And, why don't they just kill each other off? Because we're tired of this scourge coming in from these darkies, ruining our good society. Well, here's the truth about drugs. White people use illegal drugs about the same rate as black people. that is true today. It's been true. That's not even controversial. Furthermore, even though police stop and harass black people because of drugs, many times more than white people, they are found with possession of drugs at about 1% to 2% of those stops. In other words, about the same as white people. There's actually no evidence from the point of view of police actually making a dent in the quote unquote war on drugs and finding that it's a black issue. It is not a black issue, so this might come as a surprise to some people. But somehow, and maybe you can talk about this because I honestly don't know the answer. Somehow, drugs became synonymous with black people. And so the war on drugs really became a war on black people. How did that take place in our minds that it's black people doing it? Is it the media? Is it movies, television? What made us think that?
Well, it's not that the war on drugs became a war on black people. The war on drugs was always a war on black people. So let's take it back. I think the 1920s or 30s. I can't remember exactly which one. The Zoot Suit riots and marijuana. Marijuana, hemp, was a staple in the South alongside of tobacco. Washington, Jefferson, most of your founding fathers grew hemp right next to their tobacco plants. They didn't really smoke it all that much for whatever reason, but they grew it. Sometime in the early stages of California, where the Spanish workers, the Mexican workers, were farming and all, they would bring marijuana up because they used it was a kind of a stimulant for them. It helped them work better and longer in the heat and what have you. Eventually, white people, especially white women, started to smoke it as well because tobacco was considered to be something that women just didn't do. They would do marijuana or opium, which is far worse than most of the stuff that we have now.
Yes.
Or laudanum, if they wanted to get nice and technical with it. But what they found out, what they realized was that white people were getting addicted to it, and it was causing issues with them working or doing just their day-to-day stuff. When they'd ask them where they got it from, we got it from our Mexican worker, gardener, or whoever else. So they started saying that marijuana specifically was the devil's weed that the Mexicans used to try and get white women to be more pliant so that they could rape them and ravish them and do all the things that they've said that black people do to white women forever, and that campaign spiraled and spiraled and spiraled until, again, the 1920s, 30s or so, where a few Hispanic, I say Hispanic because I think there are some Ecuadorians in there or what have you, but Hispanic sailors some sailors were accosting Hispanic people at the docks because they like them for whatever reason. They happen to have marijuana because they were smoking. It was legal back then, so why not? And they pretty much lynched the Hispanics there, and there was a little mini riot. They called it the Zoot Suit riots because of how they dressed. Like I said, I think it was the 20s or 30s. I'm not sure. I don't have it in front of me. But that blew up because so many white people died in that riot. It went nationwide, and the reporters did a quote-unquote deep dive and realized, hey, it was marijuana that did it. It wasn't because of anything racist, because we're Americans. We're not racist. It had to be the drugs. Mm. And again, it kept on going. They banned marijuana, looked at opium, which the opium wars, read up about that, how the Brits, along with the U.S., literally started wars to keep the Chinese addicted to opium. Mm-hmm. But it kept spiraling there, and that's around the same time, around the Great Depression, where the FDA started, excuse me, regulating what was in drugs, what was in food, and what have you. And they realized that this whole class of drugs, the opiates, the ones like opium, poppy, cocaine, heroin, all that, had possible medicinal as well.
Sorry.
So they,
I'm a man of many painkillers.
Yeah. so they wanted that to be in the hands of the government and not in the hands of Tom, Dick, and Harry, or in this case, Jose, Jesus, and Tyrone. Mm-hmm. So they made it illegal for you to grow poppy and hemp and the things that they've been using forever at this point, and criminalized it because it's a criminal act and it's something that we've been doing all along before. We never stopped. So now it's something else that they can throw at us that, hey, drugs are the cause of everything.
So by decriminalizing a thing that brown people by criminalizing a thing that brown people were already doing, the war on drugs was always synonymous with the war on brown people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember where I heard it from, but it's something along the lines of, I don't know of any black companies that make those little dime bags that you get marijuana in. Oh. You know, I don't know any black companies that import and export or even grow poppy from Argentina or the South America or Southeast Asia or anything. How is it getting to the States to begin with? Because it's not us that's doing it. You know?
No, we weren't flying those planes over the border.
Yeah, we don't have 200 acres worth of marijuana fields in the forest somewhere.
How would we have gotten that land? Because it's a very land intensive kind of thing.
Right.
You've got to have control of a lot of land.
we are the scapegoats. We are the end users. We're the end users, and it's used as an excuse to not fix other things. Because if you can blame the problems in urban America on drugs, that means that it's an individual choice. It's my choice to take drugs.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I chose to do, so it's something that I have to handle. It's not saying that it doesn't have anything to do with I'm taking drugs because I can't cope in this schizophrenic world. I'm afraid that every time I see a cop, I'm going to die. So I smoke a joint every now and again to calm me down so I can sleep at night.
In the meantime, white women can just call their doctor and ask for another dose of laudanum.
Right. And nowadays the not heroin. What's that? The opioid epidemic. I've been driving around.
OxyContin.
Yeah. I've been driving around and seeing for the first time ever billboards. If you're addicted to XYZ, call us. We can help.
Right.
With government, they're like, wait, what? It's an epidemic now that white people are prominent white people are being affected by it. Yeah, what the fuck ever.
So if you, white woman, are addicted to that OxyContin that your doctor keeps writing you every time you ask for it, call us and we'll help. But if you see a black person smoking a joint, we are going to kill that fucker dead. So
I spent about a decade in Atlanta. About 2 decades in Atlanta, both in college and outside of college. The safest I've ever felt, even when I was at college in Morehouse there, the safest I'd ever felt was in what everybody would consider at the time the ghetto. My next door neighbor was a drug dealer. My neighbor upstairs was a rival drug dealer for a rival gang. That's the safest I've felt ever, because I knew nothing was going to go on there. They weren't trying to fight each other. They respected each other, and they didn't want shit to go down at their house. So I could leave my apartment complex with the door not only unlocked but open and not have to worry about things. I got a little bit more money and moved to a wider side of town, and I was scared every damn day.
Yeah, well, I've only been robbed once, and that was when I was in a nice white apartment complex.
Right.
The crappy black neighborhoods that I've lived in my adult life, I have never once been robbed. I've never once been harassed by anybody. I've been assaulted by a loud jungle jam, but that's another story. I've never been, sorry, people who like that jungle jam. Anyway.
Jungle jam.
What's jungle jam? Jungle jam. That's what we white people call rap music.
Ah.
Yeah. Your hippity hoppity jungle jams. So, come at me, bros. I'm right here. Skeptics and Seekers at gmail.com. So at any rate, yes, I can get lost in the remembrances here, but I want to take one more step down history to get us to today. And I'll just say 2 names: Rodney King, George Floyd, and everything between there, because these are the events that happened on camera.
So let's I don't want to downplay anything with George Floyd, but let's, instead of George Floyd, let's do Rashard Brooks. I'm not sure if you've been keeping up with anything, but this is Sunday, so Friday in Atlanta, He was murdered by a cop, shot in the back. The cop said that he was fleeing after being suspected of, shoplifting. He was handcuffed, running away, and shot in the back in Atlanta on Friday.
Oh.
Yesterday, I spent a good deal of the night watching live streams of my friends in Atlanta as Wendy's, one of the Wendy's that I used to go to because I used to live down there, was burning to the ground. That happened yesterday. George, again, I don't want to minimize anything that happened with George Floyd on Memorial Day, but I mean, literally yesterday or the day before yesterday, it's still happening.
Yeah, Rashard Brooks, is that, yeah, okay.
I believe it did get caught on film as well. Fortunately, the mayor has fired the cop who was involved, the cops who were involved with that.
Ooh, he got fired.
But that's it so far. Again,
he got fired. It's what more they wanted him to do. I mean, if he lost his job, he'll have to now fill out an application and get another job.
No, he won't even have to fill out the application. There are other police departments that are already scouting him.
So yes, Rashard Brooks, and any other fool that gets himself shot while handcuffed in police custody at the time that we're talking right now, because it's probably happening right now. The only point that I'm making with, and I just started Rodney King because that's the first one I remember through today, is these are the ones we have video for.
Right.
It's the video. It's so the racism and the unfairness, the injustice at the hands of police is so institutionalized that they don't even care if the cameras are rolling anymore. Now, you would think that, you know, before the cameras, they're like, okay, yeah, we're safe. But when they realized that everybody had a cell phone, that they would change their behavior if the cameras were rolling.
Well, no, you wouldn't think that if you knew the history a bit more, because remember back in the 50s and 60s, and during the lynch, the Summer of Love that title for Bloody Summer. But
Summer of Love. We'll go with that.
During those lynchings, cops were seen and photographed. They would like take selfies, essentially selfies or ussies, next to lynched black people and send them around as postcards. I mean, it wasn't a secret that they were killing people, that they were proud of it. It's always been the case.
Right, but during that time, this is actually the weakest comeback that will make all year. During that time, it was acceptable. You know, it was expected. We are supposed to be beyond that now.
I would posit that in those instances like Rodney King and Philando Castile and Amadou Diallo, there was a video for Amadou Diallo, but in those instances where there is video, like a video of the murder, and pigs still got off.
Right. Right.
I mean,
that's the outrage that I'm stirring right at the moment. So we have the video. They still got off, but it's not even just that. Phew, got off. They are so comfortable that the law is such, forget the law, that the situation is such that they are comfortable doing it, and they don't even have to worry about whether they're going to get off. And so, it's great to see when they're convicted from time to time, but they have been doing this for so long in front of the camera, practically posing, and without fear of reprisal.
Which is why, bringing it back to the beginning there, burn it all down.
Yes, this is...
Defund and abolish police stations, police departments. Hell, there is, I can't think of the name of it right now, but there is a police training camp where essentially they teach cops how to beat shooting raps. That's fairly official. I saw it on This Week Tonight with John Oliver. Did it, their last episode on police goes into it a bit more. Behind the Bastards had a couple podcast episodes on it. But there are literally courses that cops can take on how to beat the rap when you shoot someone, when you kill someone.
Yeah, isn't it a shame that we've got to learn our history and current civics from a smarmy Brit? this is. What?
Is there really any other type of Brit?
I'm sorry, Matthew Taylor. Matthew is one of my co-hosts, frequent co-hosts on Skeptics and Seekers. He was on that race podcast we did.
Yeah. Doesn't like to be called Matt.
Yeah, he does not like to be called Matt, and I do it all the time. I don't know why. I'm a mean man. I'm so sorry, Matt. Yeah. So honestly, I imagine the numbers in the millions of people who are, learning things about the system and about history from John Oliver. This is a failure of our education system because we just don't teach this. The very cursory, shallow skim of history that we just went through just now.
I can't agree with that. I can't agree that it's a failure of the educational system, because the educational system is designed to push people into working for other people, push people into working a 9-to-5 factory job. That doesn't exist anymore. That's what it was designed to do, with the bells, with the periods, with the how it's structured, designed to push people into working.
Yes. So yes, the fact that we don't know it means the education system is working the way it's supposed to be. I just say that the way it's supposed to work is a failure. Ask yourself, how are people supposed to learn about this? I mean, people listening to this podcast and are thinking, man, it's going on. We haven't even scratched the surface. We haven't even talked about anything that would remotely be considered academic right now.
Right.
The history is so deep, and it is well recorded. I mean, we have records of everything. And yet people don't know any of it. And so when they hear us say something like, let it burn, I'm just trying to give them a little bit of context here. And I just hope that it's enough to spark you to go to a library and rent a book. Because it's bad. And people, we have been crying out for 150 years. You should have heard us enough by now to be curious enough about what we're talking about to go read a book. Try to figure it out. It's too late in the game to cry ignorance.
Not even necessarily going to a library. Get on Audible. They don't have a lot of books on Black history from people who were actually there, but they have enough to get you pointed in the right direction. Black Against Empire by Joshua Bloom is a good one. It's about the Panthers essentially, but it touches on absolutely everything that we just did, and what the Panthers were doing about it in the '60s. I mean, it's nothing new.
So, Burn It Down. I also want to see if I can't create an analogy that might help someone at least understand why a person might think that. Imagine if this society was built on the backs, not of Black people, but let's say that there was some scientific breakthrough, and 100, 200 years ago, and we were able to give the people of this society a good life today because it was originally started by killing all Jews and draining their blood, and we could make a special potion from their blood. And we just did that for a long time. And now we can sit back and enjoy the benefits of that. How did you feel about that? I mean, this society would never be a place where they could call home and feel comfortable. For them, this was built on an atrocity. And if you want to get rid of the last vestiges of that atrocity, you have to start over. There's no way to do it, man.
I like your analogy. The sci-fi post-apocalyptic nerd in me would probably read that book. But
I write bad fiction, so that's I have a history of writing bad fiction. Now you know why I have never managed to publish a fiction book. I'm a nonfiction writer. So
the analogy that I've used with my pink friends when we get into it is this. So imagine you are making a cake from scratch. You've got using your recipe that you just came up with. Everything looks like it's going to be awesome. You put in your milk, your eggs, blah, blah, blah. You put in the oven. Everything is going great. But then all of a sudden, somebody comes through and sees the milk, drinks some of it, and you realize that the milk is spoiled. The cake is already made. You're ready to put the icing on it. Are you going to try and take out the milk and fix it? Or are you going to throw it away or start over again?
Okay, I like that analogy. It works, but there's no sci-fi angle in there. We got to workshop that.
I'll leave that to you.
No. So yes, we can analogize all day. The point being, I think that most people, even the good white people, would understand those analogies, but for some reason, they don't understand the actual, real dystopic history that took place, and that's taking place right now. And they can't get inside of our experience. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It makes them the bad guy.
Yeah.
Everybody's the hero in their own story, and if they did what you just suggested, it would make either them or their tribe, their family members, the bad guy, and nobody wants to be the bad guy.
Well, right. Well, this is why they can't see systemic racism. They will be glad to march with you and say, "Oh yeah, death of George Floyd, that was awful," and they will try to make George Floyd the issue. That's the poster child. And we can all say that was bad, and phew, okay, we did our marches, we got those guys arrested, and we solved racism. This is what protests do for white people. They give, and when I say, I just mean some white people. I know that some of y'all be crazy as the rest of us. This is what it does for them. It gives them cover, and it allows them to say, okay, we settled that. Yeah. So, but we're saying, no, this is not about George Floyd. We've been banging this drum for a long time. And I think you are right. We're never going to get the kind of justice that we're calling for in this system, especially playing by the rules of this system.
Well, that's just it. This system has the failsafe. Then that was kind of built into it in the Declaration of Independence. When your current system of government doesn't work for you, you have the right to abolish it and start something else. I mean,
right? Yeah, if you can get enough
British
people to agree with you, right? So let's wind it down a little bit, and I want to get some advice from you. I need to ask you a question because I've been pondering this myself for the last few days, weeks, years. I don't have an answer. As I say, I've walked in the world of white people for most of my life. And I care about white people. When I have a conversation like this, and it's only been recently that I've been able to have a conversation like this in public on a mic where people can hear me, because I'm worried about what the white people will think of me when they see me behaving this way. They will be so disappointed. I thought you were better than that.
But you were our bro.
Yeah. So
one of the good ones.
So my question for you is actually this, because I do feel for the white people who are hearing this and feeling aggrieved. And I probably shouldn't, but I do. How do we communicate to them that this is systemic and institutional and deeply painful when they simply can't see it that way? When they refuse to think of it as institutional, what can we say? Because I'm having a hard time just maintaining good relationships at this point with people who say, "Yeah, well, I don't see it." 20 years ago, I could do it, but today I'm just. What are you looking at that I'm not? And I feel like I'm going to have a hard time maintaining some of those white friendships. How do you communicate to people what we're talking about?
Well, just as bluntly as we've been talking here, burn it all down. I'm done trying to convince Pinks that things should change, and that Black Lives Matter, and that trans lives matter, and that the system is it's not broken. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's designed to do, but that the system is not good anymore.
Yeah.
We've been having these conversations since the first enslaved African came over on the good ship Jesus, screaming, "No, please stop!"
Yeah.
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 There's nothing that you can do for willful ignorance. The resources are out there and are being and have been out there and have been flashing in their faces like alarm bells forever. That they don't want to see it. You know what? Fine. I'm not your Negro. I don't care that we work together or that we've grown up together. You know what? Bye. I don't need you. You don't want to listen. If after however many years we've been together in whatever capacity, you don't see the need or desire to listen to me when I speak, fuck you. Bye. I don't have that conversation.
Yeah, I'm getting there rapidly. To go all the way there would dismantle my world for a second time, and it would be more devastating this time. I did it once when I left the church.
Right.
Walking away from Christianity and becoming an out atheist is one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I lost the community that made up my life doing it. I don't know that I can do it again. But I tell you what else I can't do. I'm done begging. I'm done on my knees begging for small concessions. Martin Luther King can raise from the dead and go fuck himself. I'm not interested in his type of concessions anymore. I'm not interested in crawling on my knees and begging and then cheering when they take down the statue of a man who spent his life trying to keep my people enslaved. This is what we cheer. This is victory for us in 2020. I can't do that anymore. I can't pretend to be even happy or moved by those kinds of small steps anymore. And for the people who just don't understand, who don't get it, I spent years as a Christian teaching this. I had a curriculum. I made a small dent in a small corner of my world. But I spent that time doing that. And as an atheist, I spent time as a community servant, and I did my speeches and my rallies and made a difference in the things that we were trying to do, and I did that. And even after that, I spent my time cultivating more friendships and being patient with people who are not mean-spirited. They just don't know any better. And I cultivated those relationships. And I'm just tired of the whole thing now. And I don't want to lose those relationships, but I don't want to spend any more time teaching. I've done my time teaching. I'm not a school teacher. Go to school, for Pete's sake. I've spent my time rallying and speaking and breaking down the walls. I'm tired of doing that. I've spent my time doing that. And for that, I have seen in my lifetime, I've talked about one instance, but I've actually seen in my lifetime twice the business end of a police special for no good reason. That's been my reward of a life lived. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I have a library card. I'm legally blind, but I even read print books when the book is interesting enough and compelling enough because I love knowledge. I am a decent human being. I don't litter. I pick up litter when I see it. I have brought strangers into my home because they were homeless and they needed help, and I didn't give them a quarter. I gave them a room. I have done these things, and for that, I have had my life flash before my eyes with white police ready to shoot me for no good reason. That's my reward. I'm done begging for crumbs, and I don't want to lose my community, but I'm done teaching you and explaining to you. And I need you to hear me well enough and care enough to at least look into it, because I'm not crazy. There's something there. Find it. It's not my job to make you learn. So, that's all I got, man. What do you got? What do you want to end with?
There is a community out there, or communities rather, depending on what you need at the time. Out there, we are safe landing spaces for when you get out of the ones that are toxic to you. Again, the Angry Black Rant. Angry Black Rant discussion group on Facebook is where I spend most of my days It's one such community. Black non-believers is another one. We're there for you because we have the same and similar experiences, whether you're a house nigga or not. like Jay-Z said, at the end of the day, you're still a nigga.
Yeah.
We got you.
Yeah. Well, my part of the African American culture, we were the lucky ones in one way, but we were the unlucky ones in another way, because we were the ones who simply didn't know what was going on with the rest of the clan, but the ones in the field saw the whole picture.
Right. And like you said, that once you didn't know, but now you do. Going back to that background that both of us share, once you were blind, but now the scales have fallen off your eyes.
Yeah.
You can know better, do better. When you were a child, you spoke as a child. When you're now that you're a man, do man things.
I love you, brother. But if you quote the Bible at me one more time, I'm going to punch you in the face.
Wait, let me turn the other cheek.
Okay, that's it. Now it's on.
But yeah, this is a good discussion, and again, I just started listening to both Secular Soup and Seekers and Skeptics and Seekers.
Very good.
So I'm not sure the format how they normally go, but this type of conversation is pretty much what Angry Black Rant is about. It started with people who had to work both sides of the community, both black and white, and they just needed a place to scream, to a place to come where people would acknowledge them and acknowledge that, okay, I'm not crazy. There are other people out there that feel this way, and just relax and just breathe a little bit,
Yeah. So it's a little bit like the atheist communities. There's a kind of a welcome to the atheist community kind of thing when a person leaves the church and they feel completely adrift and they have to deconstruct their story. And there are a lot of podcasts that are designed to help people deconstruct and find new communities, as it were. And I feel a little bit like that here. I have to have some moments of honesty here and talk about who I am and how I really feel. And that is not intended to alienate any of my friends, especially lifelong friends that I've had. But you have to know, if you're going to be my friend, you have to know who I am.
Right.
And this is who I am. I'm not an angry black ranter, although I can be sometimes. But
short.
Yeah, I do want to visit your community though, and see that and be a part of that, because that's a part of my history and my people, and I need to own that and embrace that, and I appreciate you. Let me take 2 minutes to say one thing that has nothing to do with this. I need to talk to black people here. And I also need to talk to the white people, the 3 white people that are left listening to this right now.
And the FBI, they're on this call too. So
yeah, screw the FBI. I want to just make a pitch here, because this is a promise that I've made to my group, about a book called Surviving Corona. It is the latest book that I have co-wrote with 8 other people. So outside of the race issue, I don't know if you've noticed, you've heard of the coronavirus, right?
Seems familiar.
Just checking. Yeah. That used to be the news. Thank goodness we got that out of the headlines. Here's the thing. I live in New Jersey. When I worked in New York. I am still in Plague Central, and the curve has been flattened, thank goodness, but it hasn't been eliminated. You know, we still get anywhere from 100 to 1,000 new cases a day. You know, it depends on the day. People still dying from this stuff, and it's not just the primary effects of people catching the disease and dying; it's the secondary effects. I really wanted to talk about secondary effects with the regarding the race issue today with you, John, and the time has just slipped away. Maybe we'll just add an addendum and it can be edited back in. But
this won't be our last conversation, so don't worry about that.
Okay, so the thing is, the coronavirus is a bastard, and I have lived most of the last 2 or 3 months in fear of other people, especially other Black people, because you know what, Black people have been adversely affected by this at a uneven rate, and we could talk about why that is. But yeah, the coronavirus, which knows no race, has been wiping our people out. As if it were designed to do that. I'm not suggesting that it was. I don't believe any such nonsense. But there are reasons why we have been affected so badly by it. And so we still are. And even if you survive the disease, there will be secondary and tertiary impacts on your life. If you don't survive the disease and you were the one breadwinner in the family, there are families now that are just devastated. And it's not like they can go out and get a job right now and work, because in places like New Jersey, New York, you're not going out and getting a job. And if you are, you're going out and getting a low-level job that puts you in a lot of danger. We call them essential workers these days, but they are really expendable workers. This is a problem, folks, but it's not a Black problem. Ultimately, it's not a white problem. It's just a human problem. And I was hoping that this would be one of those things that help bring us together. So myself as an atheist and 3 other atheists and 4 Christians, we got together and we decided to write Surviving Corona, Believers and Non-Believers Examine Their Worldview During This Time of Crisis. And we talk openly about our particular worldview and why we think it's superior than the other, but moreover, what some of the problems are, where some of the holes are in our worldview and how it's actually been holding up. And there's some surprising things. We have at least 2 sitting theological professors. We have broadcasters, international broadcasters of international acclaim. We've got writers, former preachers. It's a good list of people who have individual essays that they've included in this. This book is $2.99. That's enough money, so little that even a Black person can afford it. What I want you to do is I want you to buy the book, because all of that money that's collected goes to the International Red Cross for corona relief, and who knows, maybe even some of the people who find themselves beat up and maimed by police will get some of that money, because you know what the Red Cross does? The Red Cross helps people who need help. I used to work for the Red Cross once upon a time. And there are a few organizations that are better at knowing surgically where the need is and getting it there quickly and efficiently. And so the whole thing goes there. I'm not making any money off this, so you don't have to worry about supporting an asshole like me if you don't like me. This is all going to the International Red Cross. So buy the book for $2.99, Skeptics and Seekers, .squarespace.com. You can just click on that first tab. It says Surviving Corona. What I want you to do when you're there, not only to buy the book, but I want you to leave a donation. There's a big Red Cross emblem there. Just click on it and then donate 5, 10, 50. Make it 50. You know why? Because you've got it and because we need it. So do it. Make a donation. If you prefer the Kindle version, you can go to Amazon Kindle. Just type in Surviving Corona. It's the first thing that'll come up. And so we need your help. We need your help. We don't need your prayers. We don't need your thoughts. We don't need you to rally and march with us side by side. We need you to put money in the plate, starting at $2.99 and work your way up. And I thank you so much for your support.
Yeah, that's good. Send me a link to the book and all, and of course I'll buy it. But I'll put it on my show notes for my cast and put it in my group as well. So yeah, all for supporting.
Excellent. So
it seems like it'd be an interesting book for Christians, for atheists.
Yeah, actually 5 Christians. My original list was 6 Christians and 3 atheists. I wanted there to be way more Christians than atheists. And these are all fairly well-known Christians. And the reason I wanted it that way was because Christians, man, I don't want to slag on Christians after asking for support. Christians tend not to buy and read opposition material. So they don't want to be seen supporting atheists. So if there are atheists in it, they won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. But I thought by stacking the deck, I might could at least get them to look. And also, all of the Christians are fairly big name. We've got Justin Brierley and Randall Rouser and Thomas Sword and some folks like that. There are no big name atheists on that list. I'm the closest thing to a name on that list, and I am the only black person in the program. However, I wrote about half of it. This is my project, and limits be damned. So, yeah, I wanted to stack the deck in that way, but it ended up being 5 Christians and 4 atheists, as it turned out. Still a lot of Christians, people. So you can feel good about it. And none of the money is helping atheists. We atheists will, if we were starving before the book, we'll starve after. So don't you worry about that. Is it okay, even though we have a natural end to this discussion, if I just tack on a few words about secondary effects? And Amey, I'm sorry to make your editing job harder, but not really. So just a quick word, because a lot of there's an aspect of the conversation that we've had that gets lost, and I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about in a conversation. So I just wanted to put it out there for the now 2 white people still listening at this point. It is not just the effect of slavery that's the problem. Okay, you can do slavery today. You could make slavery legal for a day and then make it illegal again. You have not ended the problem of slavery that you created by making it illegal today, because being enslaved is just the primary effect. And what I want to get you to think about more deeply are the secondary and tertiary effects. And so I'll use another parable, another analogy, and I'll see if I can make this one a little bit more successful. If I have a job interview and I'm all dressed up in my suit and I get assaulted by a bully and they punch me in the face and then they run off and leave, and maybe they come back and apologize later. You know, they had a moment of rage and they're really sorry. Okay, sir, I forgive you. Is it over? No, it's not over. Because what happened is I got punched in the face, man. That hurts. That hurts real bad. And I probably got a black eye. Yeah, black people can get black eyes. And I probably got a swollen jaw here in the process. Yeah, I don't know how my jaw got swollen. I got punched in the eye. Don't worry about it. Just work with me on this analogy, all right? These are some other things that happen as a result of that. And even though the person has apologized, and to the best of my ability, I've forgiven them, by the time I get to the job interview, do you know what happens? I am whinging in pain because getting punched in the face hurts, man. So I'm in pain. I'm distracted. My eye and cheek makes it look like I've been in a brawl. My tie is probably a little mussed, and I probably smell bad at this point. All because someone punched me in the face. Now the punch is over. They've apologized. But you know what's going to happen at that interview? I'm not going to get the job. I am not going to get the job that I needed to earn money to support my family. These are secondary effects of what you did. And those effects are like gifts that keep on giving. There's secondary and tertiary effects all the way down. And so even if we stopped at slavery or Jim Crow, the secondary and tertiary effects of that on an entire race of people cannot be dismissed, and it does not go away in a few generations. You can't just say sorry and say the table's reset and everything's okay. It's not okay, and it's not gonna get okay. Okay.
Which is why we burn it all down.
Thanks, John. I'll put this recording on SNS so that my audience will get to know you. And in that, tell us how they come to get to know you. Where do they reach you?
So right now it's just Jon Livingston. I'm fairly open on Facebook. Angry Black Rant, pretty much anything that has Angry Black Rant on it will get to me and the Angry Black Rant crew. But yeah, that's where I live. I have Twitter and Instagram, but I don't do anything on them. I let other people do it, and I'll re-forward it or repost it or whatever. But I don't. Facebook is pretty much where I live. And yeah, the Angry Black Rant podcast.
Yeah. And again, skepticsandseekers.squarespace.com. You can get to know the site there, catch up on the podcast. Write me directly at skepticsandseekers.gmail.com. At gmail.com. And I see all of the email and I respond to every one of them so far, which lets you know that I don't have 1 million listeners yet because I can still respond to them. So thanks so much. And good talk.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Thank you, David.
Thanks to all of you motherfuckers who put up with the Ameiys droning on week after week. If you enjoy their delightful bitchcraft, please follow them on all of the social medias and send them all of your money on Patreon or PayPal. You can find them on these platforms by using the Google machine. It's not hard. If you want to bitch with other fans about the show, join the Secret Soup Talk Facebook group. If you want to tell Amey and Amey to fuck off personally, you can send an email to secularsouppodcast@gmail.com, although it may go unanswered. Please rate and review the show on iTunes, Facebook, and wherever else you can review things like this. It will help spread the soup gospel far and wide. And hey, text someone right now. Tell your friends. As always, we'll leave you with the vocal stylings of Mr. Eli Bosnick.
Secular soup creed. Soup is the ultimate virtue. It's delicious, nutritious, patriarchy smashing, racism fighting, warm and fuzzy, human affirming, fun having, anti-theist, glitter throwing, tummy satisfying, pair of new shoes fulfilling, diversity seeking, happiness. Minestrone, beef and barley, chicken broth and split pea, gazpacho, tomato, clam chowder and potato, chicken noodle, beef noodle, egg drop and ramen cup, miso, gumbo, leek and pho. Grab a bowl and taste the magic. Slurp even this.